Tell us in the comments which city you're listening from. Click the like button, and let's begin the story. Lucas was 10 years old when he discovered that Director Vargas of the Santa Teresa Orphanage was selling children to criminal networks operating across 3 states. That night, he had been awake in the dormitory when he heard voices drifting up from the director's office below. The window was cracked open, and the conversation carried clearly through the humid summer air. "The girl Sophia is perfect for what they need," Vargas said in his cold, businesslike tone. 9 years old, quiet, no family asking questions. "She'll adapt quickly." "And the payment?" asked an unfamiliar male voice. "Half now, half on delivery." The usual arrangement. Lucas pressed his face against the window and saw Sophia being led to a white van by 2 men he had never seen before. She was holding her only possession, a stuffed rabbit with 1 ear missing, and her eyes were wide with confusion and fear. She looked up at the dormitory window. For just a moment, their eyes met. Then the van door closed, and she was gone. Lucas knew what happened to children who disappeared from the orphanage. Everyone knew, even if no one dared to speak about it. Some were sent to illegal factories, others to farms where they worked until their bodies gave out. The youngest simply vanished into networks that no one wanted to name. He had arrived at Santa Teresa 3 years earlier, after his parents died in a bus accident on the coastal highway. With no living relatives and no documents proving his full identity, he had been transferred to the state orphanage system, where he became just another file in an endless bureaucracy of forgotten children. Director Vargas ran the orphanage like a business. The government subsidies meant to feed and clothe 50 children were pocketed, while the children ate watery soup and wore donated clothes that never fit. The building itself was crumbling. Mold grew in the corners of every room. The plumbing barely functioned, and during the rainy season, water poured through holes in the roof. But the worst part was not the hunger or the cold. It was knowing that at any moment, a child could be selected for a special opportunity and never return. Lucas had watched it happen 7 times in 3 years. Now Sophia was the 8th. That night, Lucas made the decision that would change his life forever. He could not save Sophia. She was already gone. But he could escape before his own name appeared on Vargas's list. He waited until 2 in the morning, when the night guard made his rounds on the far side of the building. Then he pushed open the 2nd-floor bathroom window, the one with the broken latch that had never been repaired, and climbed down the drain pipe. His hands were slick with rain, and twice he nearly lost his grip. But fear gave him strength. When he dropped into the muddy courtyard behind the orphanage, he did not look back. He ran. The city of Santos sprawled before him, a labyrinth of narrow streets, industrial zones, and neighborhoods he had never been allowed to explore. Rain poured from the sky in sheets, soaking through his thin shirt and worn shoes within minutes. He had no plan beyond putting distance between himself and the orphanage. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs trembled with exhaustion. When he finally stopped to catch his breath in the doorway of a closed butcher shop, he heard the sound that confirmed his worst fear. Engines. White vans, moving slowly through the streets with their headlights cutting through the rain. They were already searching for him. Lucas pressed himself deeper into the shadows, watching as 2 vans passed within meters of his hiding place. Through the rain-streaked windows, he could see men with flashlights scanning alleys and doorways. When the vans turned the corner, he ran again. For hours, he moved through the city like a ghost, always listening, always watching for the white vans that seemed to be everywhere. Twice more, he narrowly avoided search patrols. Once, he had to hide in a garbage container, pressing himself beneath bags of rotting food, while footsteps passed within arm's reach. By dawn, he was exhausted, starving, and shivering uncontrollably from the cold. That was when he saw it. At the end of a forgotten street in the old district, past boarded-up shops and crumbling colonial buildings, stood the ruins of the Cinema Royal. Even in its destroyed state, the building was massive, 3 stories of blackened stone and twisted metal, with empty window frames that stared out like hollow eyes. The marquee had long since collapsed, and the front doors hung open on broken hinges. Lucas had heard stories about the Cinema Royal. Everyone in Santos knew about it, though few had ever seen it. The theater had burned in 1952 during a children's matinee. 17 people died, most of them trapped in the upper balconies when the exits jammed. After the fire, the building had been abandoned. No one wanted to rebuild on cursed ground. For decades, it had stood empty, a monument to tragedy that the city preferred to forget. Children whispered that the place was haunted. Adults avoided it entirely, which made it the perfect hiding place. Lucas approached cautiously, listening for any sign of other squatters or dangerous inhabitants. But the ruin was silent except for the sound of rain dripping through the collapsed roof. He stepped through the broken front doors into what had once been the grand lobby. The floor was covered in debris, charred wood, broken glass, and decades of accumulated filth. The walls were black with soot, and the ceiling had partially collapsed, leaving jagged beams exposed like broken ribs. To his left, a wide staircase led to the upper floors, though many of the steps had rotted away. To his right, a corridor disappeared into darkness. Straight ahead were the doors to the main theater. They hung open, revealing rows of burned seats and a stage buried beneath rubble. Lucas was about to explore further when he heard something that made his blood freeze. Voices outside. The search teams had followed him to the old district. With nowhere else to go, Lucas ran deeper into the ruined theater, stumbling over debris in the darkness. He could hear the men entering the lobby behind him, their boots crunching on broken glass. "Check every room," one of them ordered. "The kid has to be here somewhere." Lucas found himself in what had once been the main theater. Rows of charred seats stretched before him, and high above, the remnants of a chandelier hung precariously from a damaged ceiling. Rain poured through the collapsed roof, creating pools of water on the sloped floor. He was trapped. The voices were getting closer. That was when he noticed something strange. On the left wall of the theater, partially hidden behind a scorched pillar, hung a strip of red velvet curtain. It was impossibly intact, untouched by the fire that had consumed everything else. The curtain was heavy, elegant, and completely out of place in the destruction surrounding it. Lucas grabbed the fabric, intending to hide behind it. But when he pulled it aside, he discovered that it was not hanging against a wall. It was covering a door that should not exist. Behind the curtain was a narrow wooden door, painted black and completely hidden from view. The wood was smooth and unburned, as if the fire had never reached this part of the building. Lucas could hear the searchers entering the main theater behind him. He turned the handle. The door opened silently. Behind it was a narrow staircase descending into absolute darkness. Without hesitation, Lucas slipped through the door and pulled it closed behind him. He stood in the darkness, heart pounding, listening as the men searched the theater above. "Nothing here," one of them finally said. "Just burned junk. Let's check the upper floors." Their footsteps faded. Lucas waited until he was certain they were gone. Then he descended the hidden staircase, feeling his way along the walls. The stairs went down much farther than he expected, at least 3 stories, deep beneath the foundation of the theater. The air grew cooler and drier as he descended, and the smell of smoke and decay gradually disappeared, replaced by something else. Old paper, dust, and something faintly sweet like aged wood and fabric. At the bottom of the stairs, Lucas found another door. He pushed it open and stepped into a room that stole his breath. He was standing in a private projection room, completely untouched by the fire that had destroyed the theater above. The room was perhaps 20 feet square, with walls lined in dark wood paneling. In the center stood a massive film projector, a beautiful antique machine of brass and glass that gleamed even in the dim light filtering down from a hidden ventilation shaft above. Around the walls were shelves filled with metal film canisters, each one carefully labeled with dates and titles. There were hundreds of them, decades of cinema preserved in perfect condition. But it was what Lucas saw on the far wall that made him stop completely. Photographs. Dozens of them, pinned to a corkboard. Black and white photographs of children. Children at the theater. Children smiling. children holding popcorn and watching movies with expressions of pure joy. Beneath the photographs were handwritten notes. Maria, first time seeing color film. She cried during the ending. Joao watched the same cowboy movie 5 times. Says he wants to be a hero. Anna brought her baby brother. Both fell asleep in the warm theater. Let them stay. Lucas moved closer, studying the photographs with growing confusion and wonder. These were not just random theater patrons. These were street children, orphans, children in ragged clothes with dirty faces and bare feet. And someone had been documenting their visits with obvious care and affection. On a small desk beneath the photographs, Lucas found a leather journal. The cover was worn but intact, and when he opened it, he saw pages filled with neat handwriting in fading ink. The first entry was dated March 15, 1947. My name is Eduardo Monteiro, and I am the projectionist of Cinema Royal. For 3 years, I have been running secret matinee screenings for the street children of Santos. They come through the back entrance, the one no one else uses, and I let them watch whatever film is playing that day. I give them food for my own salary, bread, fruit, sometimes soup from the cafe next door. I ask nothing in return except that they be kind to one another and that they remember these moments of beauty and safety. Many of them have nowhere to sleep. Some are sick. All of them are invisible to a society that has abandoned them. But here, in the darkness of the cinema, they are seen. They matter. And for 2 hours, they can forget their suffering and simply be children again. Lucas read entry after entry, his hands trembling. Eduardo had documented 5 years of secret screenings. He wrote about individual children, their personalities, their struggles, their dreams. He recorded which films made them laugh and which made them cry. He noted when a child stopped coming and worried about what had happened to them. The journal revealed a man who had dedicated his life to creating sanctuary for the forgotten. But the final entries grew darker. November 3, 1952, the owner discovered my screenings. He threatened to fire me and report the children to the authorities. I begged him to reconsider, but he is a man who sees only profit. He has scheduled a renovation that will seal the back entrance permanently. After this week, the children will have no way in. I am trying to find another solution, but time is running out. November 10, 1952. I have made a decision that will likely cost me everything. I have created a hidden room beneath the projection booth, a safe space where children can shelter if they are in desperate need. I have stocked it with preserved food, blankets, medical supplies, and water. I have hidden money in a locked box. I have written instructions for how to contact families who have agreed to help street children. If I am fired or arrested, at least this room will remain. At least they will have somewhere to go. The next entry was written in a shaking hand. November 17, 1952. There is a fire. I can hear screaming upstairs. The exits are blocked. I am going to help. If anyone finds this journal, please know that every child I saved was worth it. Tell them. The entry ended mid-sentence. Lucas stood in the silent room, tears streaming down his face. Eduardo Monteiro had died trying to save children during the fire. The newspapers had reported it as a tragic accident, faulty wiring in the projection booth. But Eduardo's journal revealed the truth. He had run toward the fire, not away from it, trying to rescue children who had been attending one of his secret screenings. He had died doing what he had always done, protecting the forgotten. Lucas sank to the floor, clutching the journal to his chest, and wept. He cried for Eduardo, who had given everything. He cried for the children in the photographs, who had lost their sanctuary. He cried for Sophia, taken in the night. He cried for himself, alone and hunted in a city that did not care. But he also cried because, for the first time in 3 years, he understood something that changed everything. He was not the first child to need this room. Eduardo had built it knowing that someday, someone like Lucas would find it. And when Lucas finally stopped crying and began to explore the hidden room more carefully, he discovered that Eduardo's preparations had been even more thorough than he had imagined. in a locked cabinet, the key hidden beneath the projector. He found sealed containers of preserved food with dates from the 1950s. Incredibly, much of it was still edible. There were cans of condensed milk, preserved fruits, crackers wrapped in wax paper, and jars of honey that had crystallized but could still be eaten. There were wool blankets, neatly folded, a first aid kit with bandages and antiseptic, candles and matches stored in waterproof containers, even a small camping stove with fuel. But most importantly, there was a metal box marked for the child who finds this room. Inside the box was money, old currency, but still valuable, along with a list of names and addresses written in Eduardo's careful handwriting. Trusted families who will help children in need. Dr. Helena Andrade, Rua das Flores 47, will provide medical care, no questions asked. Father Miguel Santos, Igreja São Pedro, will offer sanctuary and contact with adoption services. Professor Carmen Diaz, Biblioteca Municipal, will arrange education and safe housing. Attorney Marco Silva, Avenida Central 203, specializes in protecting exploited children. Beneath the list was a final letter, addressed to whoever finds this. Lucas read it with trembling hands. My dear unknown friend, if you are reading this, you are in terrible danger. You are alone, afraid, and hunted by people who see you as disposable. I know this because I have seen it hundreds of times in my work with the forgotten children of Santos. But I also know something else. You are stronger than you realize. You have survived things that would break many adults. And you have found this room, which means you are both clever and determined. This room is yours for as long as you need it. The food and supplies will keep you alive. The names on the list are people I trust with my life and with yours. They have all agreed to help any child who comes to them speaking my name. You are not alone anymore. When you are ready, take this letter to any of the people I have listed. Tell them Eduardo sent you. They will protect you, help you find safety, and ensure that those who hurt you face justice. But take your time. Heal here first. This room was built to be a sanctuary, a place where the hunted can rest and the broken can mend. The films on the shelves are not just entertainment. They are reminders that beauty exists, that heroes are real, and that even the darkest stories can end in hope. Watch them when you need courage. Remember them when you need strength. And when you finally leave this room and return to the world above, remember that you carry the light of every child who was saved here. You matter. You are seen. You are worth fighting for. With all my hope, Eduardo Monteiro, November 10th, 1952. Lucas folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box. For the first time since escaping the orphanage, he felt something other than fear. He felt purpose. Eduardo had built this sanctuary 70 years ago, but it was still fulfilling its mission. The room had been waiting for Lucas, for this exact moment. And Lucas suddenly understood that his escape from the orphanage was not just about survival. It was about exposing the truth. Eduardo had saved children by giving them sanctuary and hope. Lucas could honor that legacy by making sure no more children were sold, exploited, or discarded. But to do that, he needed help. He needed the people on Eduardo's list. Over the following days, Lucas established a routine in the hidden projection room. He ate sparingly from Eduardo's supplies, rationing everything to make it last. He washed using water that dripped from the ventilation shaft into a bucket he found in the corner. He explored every inch of the room, discovering additional hidden compartments containing journals, photographs, and records of Eduardo's rescue work. He also watched the films. Using the ancient projector, which still functioned perfectly, Lucas screened movie after movie on the white wall that Eduardo had used for private viewings. He watched westerns and adventures, romances and comedies, films from the 1930s and 40s that transported him to other worlds. At night, when the theater above was silent, he ventured out through the hidden passages Eduardo had created, emergency exits that led to different parts of the ruined building. He learned the layout completely, memorizing escape routes in case the searchers returned. From these explorations, he also discovered that the Cinema Royal was not entirely abandoned. Homeless people occasionally sheltered in the lobby during rainstorms. Drug users sometimes gathered in the burned-out balconies. But no one ever came near the projection room. The door behind the red curtain remained perfectly hidden. On the 5th day, Lucas decided he was ready. He dressed in the cleanest clothes he could assemble from the supplies Eduardo had left. Outdated but respectable. He packed the letter, the list of names, and several of Eduardo's journals as evidence. Then he left the theater for the first time since arriving. His first destination was the address listed for Dr. Helena Andrade. The walk across the city was terrifying. He expected to see white vans on every corner, Vargas's men searching every face. But Santos was a city of millions, and one small boy in old-fashioned clothes attracted little attention. Rua das Flores 47 was a modest medical clinic in a working-class neighborhood. The building was clean but worn, with a hand-painted sign that read Consultorio Médico Andrade, Atendimento Gratuito, free medical care. Lucas hesitated at the door, suddenly afraid. What if Eduardo's list was outdated? What if Dr. Andrade had moved, retired, or died? What if no one remembered the projectionist who had died 70 years ago? But he had come too far to turn back now. He pushed open the door and stepped into a small waiting room. Several patients sat on wooden benches, an elderly man with a bandaged hand, a mother holding a feverish child, a teenager with a badly swollen ankle. Behind a reception desk sat a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She looked up as Lucas entered. "Can I help you, young man?" she asked kindly. Lucas approached slowly, clutching Eduardo's letter like a lifeline. "I need to see Dr. Helena Andrade," he said quietly. "Eduardo Monteiro sent me." The woman's expression changed instantly. Her eyes widened, and she stood abruptly. "Eduardo Monteiro," she repeated. "The projectionist from Cinema Royal?" Lucas nodded, holding out the letter. The woman took it with trembling hands and read it quickly. When she looked up again, her eyes were filled with tears. "My God," she whispered. "I never thought after all these years. Eduardo really did prepare everything." She came around the desk and knelt in front of Lucas, studying his face with a mixture of wonder and sadness. "My name is Helena Andrade," she said gently. "And you, child, are a miracle." Lucas felt something break inside him. The wall he had built to survive the orphanage, the escape, the fear. Tears spilled down his cheeks. "I need help," he whispered. "I know," Dr. Andrade replied, pulling him into a gentle embrace. "And you're going to get it. Eduardo's promise still stands. You're safe now." She led him into her private office and locked the door. Then she made a series of phone calls, speaking in urgent but calm tones. Within an hour, the others began to arrive. Father Miguel Santos, now an elderly priest with white hair but fierce determination. Professor Carmen Diaz, a retired educator who ran a network of safe houses for at-risk youth. Attorney Marco Silva, a sharp-eyed lawyer who specialized in prosecuting child trafficking operations. All of them had been contacted by Eduardo Monteiro decades earlier. All of them had promised to help any child who spoke his name. And all of them had kept that promise, waiting for the day when Eduardo's hidden sanctuary would finally be discovered. As Lucas told his story, the orphanage, the sales, Sophia's disappearance, his escape, and the hidden projection room, the adults listened with growing fury and determination. When he finished, Attorney Silva leaned forward. "Lucas, what you've discovered is not just a sanctuary. It's evidence. Eduardo documented his rescue work extensively, and those records prove that child exploitation in Santos has been going on for generations. Combined with your testimony about the current operation, we can bring down the entire network." "But it's dangerous," Father Miguel added gravely. "Director Vargas has powerful connections. The moment we move against him, he will try to silence you." Professor Diaz nodded. "Which is why we need to act quickly and decisively. We document everything. We contact federal authorities who are not connected to the local corruption. And we make sure Lucas is protected every step of the way." Dr. Andrade placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone anymore. Eduardo built a network specifically for this moment. We are that network, and we will finish what he started. Over the following weeks, the operation unfolded with precision. Lucas remained hidden in the projection room, but now he was not alone. Members of Eduardo's network visited regularly, bringing fresh food, supplies, and updates on the investigation. Attorney Silva obtained court orders to search the Santa Teresa orphanage based on Lucas's testimony and Eduardo's historical records. Federal police, carefully selected for their integrity, raided the facility at dawn. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. Director Vargas had been running the operation for 15 years. Detailed records documented the sale of more than 200 children to criminal networks across South America. Bank accounts revealed payments totaling millions. But most damning were the photographs, pictures of children being handed over to buyers, complete with dates, prices, and destinations. Sophia was in those photographs. So were dozens of other children Lucas had known. The raids expanded rapidly. Within days, federal authorities had arrested 37 people connected to the trafficking network, including police officers, social workers, and government officials who had enabled the operation. The story broke nationally. Orphanage director arrested in massive child trafficking ring. Brave child's testimony exposes decades of corruption. Lucas's name was kept confidential for his protection, but the details of his escape and discovery of Eduardo's sanctuary became a symbol of hope, proof that even the most vulnerable could fight back and win. The Cinema Royal became the center of the story. When reporters visited the ruined theater and discovered the hidden projection room, perfectly preserved after 70 years, the public reaction was overwhelming. Eduardo Monteiro's journals and photographs were published, revealing the extent of his secret rescue work. He became a posthumous hero. Donations poured in to restore the Cinema Royal as a memorial and community center dedicated to protecting children. The projection room was preserved exactly as Eduardo had left it, a monument to one man's quiet, persistent compassion. But for Lucas, the most important moment came 6 weeks after the raids. Attorney Silva arrived at the projection room with news. "We found her," he said simply. "Sophia." Lucas whispered. Silva nodded. She was being held at an illegal factory in Paraguay. Federal agents from 3 countries coordinated the rescue. 23 children were recovered. "She's safe now, Lucas. She's coming home." 2 days later, Lucas stood in Dr. Andrade's clinic as a car pulled up outside. The back door opened and Sophia stepped out. She was thinner than he remembered, and her eyes carried shadows that had not been there before. But she was alive. She was safe, and she was holding her one-eared rabbit. When she saw Lucas, she ran. They crashed together in the middle of the street, both crying, both holding on as if afraid the other would disappear again. "You came back," Sophia sobbed. "You came back for me." "I promised I would," Lucas whispered. Around them, the members of Eduardo's network watched with tears in their eyes. This was why they had waited 70 years. This was why Eduardo had built the sanctuary. For this exact moment. 3 months later, the Cinema Royal reopened. The exterior had been fully restored to its 1940s glory, elegant Art Deco facades, a gleaming marquee, and a grand entrance that welcomed rather than warned. But the heart of the building was the projection room. Now accessible by a beautiful spiral staircase instead of a hidden door, the room had been preserved as Eduardo had left it. His journals on display, his photographs on the walls, his projector still functional and honored. The rest of the building had been transformed into the Eduardo Monteiro Center for Child Protection, offering legal services, counseling, education, and emergency shelter for vulnerable children. Lucas and Sophia had both been adopted by families connected to Eduardo's network. They lived in different neighborhoods now, attending good schools, and receiving therapy to heal from their trauma. But they returned to the Cinema Royal every Saturday. On opening day, Lucas stood on the stage of the restored theater, looking out at an audience of hundreds. Former street children who Eduardo had helped. Families who had adopted rescued kids. Social workers and activists fighting to protect vulnerable populations. And in the front row, in a place of honor, sat an empty chair draped with red velvet, the same curtain that had hidden the door to salvation. Eduardo's chair. Lucas spoke clearly, his voice no longer trembling. Eduardo Monteiro saved me 70 years after his death. His kindness reached across time and pulled me from darkness when I had nowhere left to go. He taught me that one person, acting with persistent compassion, can change hundreds of lives. He taught me that sanctuary is not just a place, it's a promise. And today, we make that promise again. This building will always be a refuge. This door will always be open, and no child will ever be invisible again. The audience rose in applause. Behind Lucas, the ancient projector whirred to life. On the screen appeared the first film Eduardo had ever shown to street children, a silent movie about a lost child finding their way home. And in the flickering light of that projection, in a theater rebuilt from ashes, Lucas understood the full truth of what Eduardo had known all along. Stories have power. Sanctuaries have memory. And love, when given freely to the forgotten, never truly dies. It simply waits in the darkness, behind a red curtain, for the child who needs it most.